Coming up on ICTV Reports, a call to action. The Black Lives Matter Ithaca chapter asking the county to reinvent public safety.
They say blue lives matter, right? That's a job. That's not a life, that's a job. Black Lives Matter, we can never take off our skin.
Opening during a pandemic, a risky move, but how 2 new businesses in downtown Ithaca are staying afloat.
A lot of local businesses in Ithaca have been really struggling because they are dependent on people being together.
Plus, demanding change. The Ithaca Tenants Union coming together to protect renters from mistreatment and eviction.
I can't even describe the pressure that is lifted off of you when you're put in a situation where you no longer have to worry about your housing.
And a look inside 2 local organizations that are tackling the impacts of COVID-19 on job and food security.
It's like you open the doors and little hearts pour out. There's just love spread throughout, mutual aid consistently and constantly.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a brand new season of ICTV Reports. I'm your host, Madison Moore. As you can tell, we are not in our usual Studio B location. Due to a remote semester, we're adapting our show and doing it from the safety of our home. The pandemic has not stopped our correspondents, however, from reporting on stories here in Ithaca and Tompkins County from across the nation. As Black Lives Matter protests erupted nationwide this summer in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, activists and community members here in Ithaca are demanding change to public safety. I sat down with a founding member of the Black Lives Matter Ithaca chapter to better understand what the organization is calling for and what the city and county are doing to answer those calls.
My job and your job is to make sure that the next 7 generations are better off than us.
Yeah. This is Phoebe Brown. She is a local Ithaca activist who moved here almost 30 years ago. Brown started the Black Lives Matter Ithaca chapter in 2016.
Systemic racism, police brutality, unequal job placement, so many things. So our organization came together to make light of that, support people who needed support, and to bring some awareness to it. It was happening everywhere, and we felt it was important to bring it here.
Sparked by the killing of George Floyd on May 25th, Black Lives Matter protests have erupted around the country.
The suggestion has been repeatedly that George Floyd changed things. I beg to differ.
Dr. Grant Aubrey Fareed is a Cornell University professor who studies race and philosophy.
George Floyd is of a piece, and it's of a sadistic piece, because if you're a white cop, you don't understand what you've done wrong, right? That's what Derek Chauvin understood himself to be doing. He was just doing what every other white cop in this country feels entitled to do. To devastate, diminish, humiliate, and kill Black people, right? Black life is expendable. It is of no consequence.
And here in Ithaca, people have been protesting for 22 weeks straight, making their presence known in front of the Ithaca Police Department and on the Commons. While protests for the most part have been peaceful, all that changed last month. 2 individuals were arrested on October 11th for allegedly taking part in spray painting graffiti on the sidewalk outside of IPD and on the building. This was followed by an additional incident 2 weeks later when a protest was declared unlawful in front of the police department and 6 additional arrests were made. They all were released a few hours later. Throughout these protests, the message has remained the same. People are demanding police reform, and so is Governor Andrew Cuomo. He recently signed an executive order mandating all municipalities with the police department adopt a public safety plan by April 1st, 2021. Ithaca's local government is already looking inward on making these changes.
I'm actually excited about it.
Tompkins County Sheriff Derek Osborne says this new plan is a big step for him.
I think his heart was in the right place. I think he could have gone about it a much more efficient way. It's not going to create consistent change that we need.
In June, the city of Ithaca partnered with Tompkins County to work toward public safety reform. Although it's in the early stages, they're starting to talk with people in the area through online surveys and virtual public forums about what changes they want to see.
I think the police need to meet with each other before they come to meet with the community. It doesn't mean just saying hi, playing basketball games with the kids, having a barbecue. It means changing the way that you've been thinking for a very long time. I think those conversations need to be had among them. Not let's come together and sing Kumbaya, how are we going to work this together out. Yes, that time comes. I think that time should come. But right now is not the time. They say Blue Lives Matter, right? That's a job. That's not a life, that's a job. Black Lives Matter, we can never take off our skin.
So far, the surveys reveal people are showing support for defunding the police.
It doesn't mean let's fire all the police officers. So when I hear defund the police, I think of taking some of those funds and putting them elsewhere.
As far as defund the police, I think it's a bad title they've given it. It doesn't really represent, I think, what people are focused on. Trying to change services from being handled by law enforcement specifically to maybe other agencies or groups. I get that philosophy. I think it's going to take a lot of work. I'm not totally against it. I just think it's going to take real close examination.
People in Ithaca say they would much rather see funding go toward mental health services rather than to the police.
I don't think people really understand what we respond to and why. A lot of situations that people often say, well, law enforcement doesn't need to do that. Maybe somebody else can handle somebody with a mental illness in crisis. That's one example. But they don't realize how dangerous those situations can be.
Mayor Savante Myrick's plans indicate he is even on board to defund the police. In his recent 2021 budget, he proposed to defund 8 vacant police officer positions and increase funding to the Southside Community Center by 32%. Another request from people in these online surveys: increased implicit bias training and diversifying police officers, something Sheriff Osborne says is long overdue.
Really increased our training. When I took office, and since that time, I've had deputies say, I've got more training this year than my entire career.
Although this training happens only once a year and is not mandated by the state, people are also asking to demilitarize the police.
And do you think the SWAT team is necessary to still have, because there are so many people calling for it to be completely abolished, some even saying, we should change it into a food truck?
Yeah, well, yeah, I wish all our police cars could deliver meals, and that was all we had to do. But, law enforcement is a necessary thing in society. As far as the SWAT team, again, there's a time and place for everything. There are certainly incidences that occur in Tompkins County that need the resources of a SWAT team. You can't deny that.
2 community police board members, Michael Simons and Richard Onia-Jaroa, were disheartened the city has not come to them yet to be involved in new safety plans. The board has been around since 1984, and its sole purpose is to act as a liaison between the community and Ithaca Police Department.
And I wish that the city had come to the police board to start the conversation. I think that would have been a good place. I know that there are different time frames and different needs that are at play, but we also have been playing, this role for some time now. And so hopefully that changes in the future.
As for Mayor Myrick, he's confident the police department will move in the right direction.
A department that I know to be exceptionally well-trained and community-oriented, full of officers who are dedicated to serving their community.
But before reinventing public safety, Brown believes other steps need to be taken.
Education, building relationships, beginning to build the relationships and to begin to heal in our communities. Right?
As for what's ahead, not everyone has the same outlook. Sheriff Osborne hopes people in Tompkins County and law enforcement can meet in the middle.
You can support the police and also understand that Black Lives Matter, and I think that's where we should be and stop trying to divide each other.
As for Phoebe Brown, she hopes the future will be better for her grandchildren.
My hope for them is, more importantly to anything, is they continue to do the work that I've been doing, and that they help others to do the work.
Coming up after the break, correspondent Emily Hung looks at 2 new local businesses that opened up in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic and what they are doing to keep their businesses alive. Opening up a small business is challenging, but doing it during a global pandemic is uncharted waters for most. Our reporter Emily Hung talked with the Odyssey bookstore and Kimchi Korean restaurant to see how they have adapted in an uncertain time and what local and federal aid has done to keep these businesses and others like it open.
We were ready, and on Friday, March 13th, we received all of our books, and then 2 days later, pandemic hit.
It's been Laura Larson's lifelong dream to open her own bookstore. That became a reality when the Odyssey bookstore in downtown Ithaca opened its doors for the first time late June. But getting it up and running was not easy, especially in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. When businesses across the nation began closing down early March over safety concerns, Larson had just finished measuring out shelf space for her books and hiring staff to unpack boxes.
I sent all the booksellers home. We just paid them, sort of a base amount to stay home for 3 months. And my manager and I worked to get the store completely ready, one person at a time, and also bring up a website.
3 months later than expected, Larson finally opened her store to online orders, curbside pickup, and in-store service.
We've really done the full gamut. We'll mail it to you. We've even dropped off a few books. We try not to do that as a regular business model. It's not very scalable. But yes, we're trying to meet people where they are.
Not all businesses in Ithaca have been as successful. Many who were in service prior to the pandemic took a big hit during the lockdown. About a half dozen businesses downtown closed permanently, adding to the number of storefront vacancies, currently at a high of 18.
A lot of local businesses in Ithaca have been really struggling because they are dependent on people being together. So bars and restaurants and hotels, venues for like the Haunt, where you might go to see a concert, or the State Theater or the Hangar Theater. These are all places where people would go to be together.
Tom Schreier, Executive Director of the Center for Regional Economic Advancement at Cornell University, also notes the lack of college students, visitors, and tourists have contributed to the decline in revenue for businesses.
In a college town, when you've got 25,000 students at Cornell and 6,000 or 7,000 students at Ithaca College and another 3,000 at Tompkins-Cortland Community College, it's a huge influx of people, and it's not just those students, it's their parents, it's the people who come for athletic events. It's the folks who come up from corporations to speak in classes or recruit students. And none of that's happening.
At the beginning of the pandemic, the majority of monetary aid for these local businesses came from the federal government. The PPE program and economic injury disaster loans provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration gave some relief to those experiencing a temporary loss of revenue. The Downtown Ithaca Alliance played a major role in linking local businesses with these funds while they established relief at the local level. Downtown Ithaca Alliance Executive Director Gary Ferguson took the lead in putting together a resilience fund.
It was almost $500,000 that we were able to assemble from various sources, where we were able to provide small loans to close to 190 different businesses.
The fund provided qualified businesses with forgivable grants of $4,000 to $5,000.
Forgivable if you reopened your business. But that was a case where we were able to get some money out on the street very quickly to help people cover rent, to cover utilities, to just deal with some of the issues that they had to do right in the moment.
In addition to these grants, the DIA also worked with the city to establish the Ithaca Anchor Storefront Recovery Fund to help commercial storefront businesses. This allowed additional funding of up to $50,000 to keep the businesses running. About 9 were given out. However, not all qualified to receive aid. Nicole Moore is the marketing manager at Kimchi Korean Restaurant, which opened on the Commons in July. Although the restaurant did not receive funding, it has been able to remain open and serve customers.
We were planning to open back in April, May, and by now we would have had our liquor license. So because of the lockdown, we have not been able to acquire a liquor license since Town Hall has been questionable. And so we were not able to apply. We also had our launch date pushed back. And, there were just issues of trying to find workers, as well as just trying to get things up and running because what was available was limited.
Business at the restaurant has been slow because of the pandemic. Generating revenue has been a difficulty as they adhere to COVID-19 safety guidelines.
We have all our tables spaced out, and we use every other table just so that customers are not near each other. With that, we have to use limited space in the restaurant, which can bring the sales down and causes customers to go to other restaurants because they don't want to wait. Also, just finding employees because Most people are very scared to work at this time.
Despite difficulties the Odyssey Bookstore and Kimchi Korean restaurant are facing, data from the DIA shows most local businesses are in a better place than they were a couple months ago.
We have high-tech pedestrian counters in downtown, throughout downtown in our pedestrian mall. During the height of the pandemic in April and May and June, our traffic was down 85%, our foot traffic. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's down between 45 and 50%. So it's improved.
While businesses continue to weather the storm of COVID-19, owners are finding unique ways to connect with their customers in virtual settings. The Odyssey Bookstore has held online events featuring the work of novelists and poets. It's a way for the community to get together and enjoy each other's company safely.
I really feel like this is an opportunity that to find ways to collaborate, to find ways to work together, instead of it just being about like, is my business okay? I think people don't always understand, when you shop locally, those sales taxes go to support local things like the library and other local government programs that we all benefit and really appreciate. I think small businesses need to make sure that we are supporting each other, the business community, and also offering people locally what they need so that they have a reason to shop with us as well.
Coming up next, our reporter Skylar Eagle investigates the reality renters in Ithaca are facing and how one union is pushing back and fighting to keep their homes. Unemployment around the country hit an all-time high during the coronavirus pandemic. Here in Ithaca, the unemployment rate reached 10.1%, and many tenants found themselves without a job or money to pay rent. Correspondent Skylar Eagle talked with organizers of the Ithaca Tenants Union who were advocating for protections against eviction.
I can't even describe the pressure that is lifted off of you when you're put in a situation where you no longer have to worry about your housing.
For the past 4 months, there have been multiple protests in Ithaca in support of the tenants' rights movement.
Food, not rent! Food, not rent!
Driven by the Ithaca Tenants Union, a group of people fighting for tenants' rights and helping them find legal representation.
In the Tenants Union, we believe housing is a human right, no matter what.
Melanie Marsh is a member of the Tenants Union demanding more change for landlords.
We're demanding that real accountability for landlords who attempt soft evictions or shut off of utilities. We're demanding ban of single-family zoning in Ithaca.
Marsh says they are protesting to let tenants know they are protected.
The Tenants Union is here to build tenant power and make sure that tenants know and landlords know that we have power together and that we can fight against all of the harassment that is happening to tenants.
The Ithaca Tenants Union shared a list of demands at the protest, which include expanding access to the Department of Social Services and banning evictions.
We demand to build a land bank of foreclosed homes, cap the number of properties a single landlord can own, require landlords to provide renters their residential addresses so tenants can send them mail, and safety inspections and upgrades to West Village, Chestnut Hill, and other apartments that are in disrepair. Even if Cuomo doesn't change something right away, like locally in Ithaca, we want Savante to help us get safety for tenants and to make sure evictions are banned for real.
Genevieve Rand is one of the founding members of the Ithaca Tenants Union who says she was inspired by her past experiences unionizing in the local service industry.
Faced with this new problem, a lot of us who had prior experiences doing other kinds of organizing got involved in tenant organizing because that was now the most present issue in our lives, and that was the way that we knew how to solve it.
Over the course of the pandemic, millions were left unemployed. In April, the unemployment rate in Ithaca spiked at 10%, a 7-point increase from before COVID-19. This left thousands with no income and, without savings, no way to pay rent. The Tenants Union was one way people in Ithaca could fight to keep their homes. Right now, there's a moratorium on evictions nationwide and statewide until December 31st, but only for tenants who can demonstrate that their ability to pay rent has been consistently impacted by COVID-19. Kayla Lane is a member of the Tompkins County Landlords Association who says the changes to the eviction process have become burdensome for landlords, who are now required to give a 14-day notice prior to filing for eviction. If the tenant doesn't pay rent, landlords have to find another way to cover property costs and taxes.
Just recently with the CDC making the requirements of what they had to basically say they've either tried to exhaust all options for subsidy, they had to have at least been making like partial payments to their landlord. They would have had to have proven like that their income was affected by COVID, which again probably isn't super incredibly difficult.
The moratoriums have been in place for months. However, they don't protect against what the tenants union calls soft evictions.
But it doesn't stop landlords from engaging in all of the other tactics to harass people, to intimidate them, to shame them, to try to stir issues between roommates by giving some people help and some people not help, or through the joint liability clauses that are in many leases, where if one tenant misses rent, all of the tenants are punished for it.
Eviction proceedings are set to begin again this month. Now, this means that if you're unable to demonstrate any requirements set by the CDC or state moratoriums to qualify as exempt, your landlord could begin to file for eviction as soon as today.
There are many, many stages in the process, and at any stage, if you pay your rent, it resets the process to zero. So if you're having trouble paying and you're a few days late on rent and you don't know where you're going to get the money before it becomes delinquent, don't worry. You have a lot of time.
The process for eviction varies depending on the landlord.
Some landlords I've found actually start it within the month that the rent is due. So if a tenant were to be 10 to even maybe 15 days late, they would actually start the eviction process within that month.
A main obstacle for tenants trying to take legal action is a lack of knowledge about the laws that protect them, including protections against soft evictions.
There is a statute that essentially now makes soft evictions a crime. So before, if you used to report it to the authorities, they would normally say, you know, this is a civil matter between you and your lawyer, you and your landlord that has to be dealt with in civil court. But now it's actually a Class A misdemeanor to perform a soft eviction by doing things such as cutting off the utilities or essential services to a house.
Cindy Omagagula is a law student at Cornell University involved in a practicum that provides legal assistance to tenants in the area.
The way the process would work is there was a hotline and people could either email in or call in, and someone would do an intake on the person and they would describe what issue they were having, and essentially we would provide what would be considered limited advice. We weren't able to provide full representation.
Landlords now are going to try to file on anybody that owes rent, assuming that they don't genuinely know that they were COVID affected or that they haven't had prior communications with them as far as like their balance or what their ability is to pay. So I think you're going to find a lot of landlords and property owners are going to have their attorneys or themselves filing. So to put it nicely, probably the floodgates are going to open a little bit as far as evictions.
Both Rand and Lane believe landlords and tenants should work together.
People act like it's crazy when you suggest the idea of just forgiving the obligations of people who are renting and having the landlords apply for aid instead. And it's very interesting that they're so vehement about how it's our responsibility to apply for aid and to work through that system and to work out kinks. And like, the only check I've gotten from unemployment has literally been a check for $0.
Working together to come to some sort of, you know, temporary solution during these times is ideal. While it's not to say that the tenant isn't affected and they've lost their income to some extent, then the property owners are struggling too because they can't pay their responsibilities, and it'll become a trickle-down effect even locally. You know, it'll be felt by everybody.
After the break, correspondent Erika Liberati shows how Mutual Aid Tompkins and the Women's Opportunity Center have stepped up to the plate to offer people in the area immediate help. Neighbors Helping Neighbors is at the core of what Mutual Aid Tompkins set out to do, and the Women's Opportunity Center adapted services to keep their doors open to the community. Our reporter Erika Liberati sat down with the organization's leaders to hear their journeys through this difficult time.
It's like you open the doors and little hearts pour out. There's just love, spread throughout mutual aid consistently and constantly.
A light in the midst of darkness. Margaret Slattery joined Mutual Aid Tompkins at its founding when the coronavirus pandemic hit. A group of community members came together to form the organization, which was able to give back to the area with food, money, and emotional support as the public health crisis worsened. Slattery quit her full-time job right before the pandemic to volunteer her time to helping the homeless community.
I live very close to the encampments where the homeless people live, which is often referred to as the jungle. We've kind of renamed it the kingdom out of respect. But living close to this area where people are homeless, I got a particular, view on a lot of their challenges each and every day.
But the need for food expanded farther than the encampments, so Mutual Aid started food sharing cabinets for anyone to use.
The idea of Mutual Aid brought up the blue sharing cabinets. So I thought that was amazing. And I got the blue cabinet, which was so busy. That blue cabinet, I could fill it and it would empty like 4 to 6 times a day.
The food sharing cabinets are scattered all over the county for people to donate and take food and personal items. Slattery hosts her own.
I know that my cats are really upset because my house is filled with boxes. I have boxes on my deck, boxes in my driveway. My car has pretty much been a one-passenger, me, since I joined Mutual Aid Tompkins.
As the need for food grew across the county, Slattery wasn't the only one to step up to the plate. Through Mutual Aid Tompkins' Facebook group, they spread their mission of neighbors supporting neighbors. Phoebe Brown, one of the group's co-founders, said the community showed an outpouring of support.
In the beginning, it was lots of money donated. Many people who had never felt vulnerable at this time. So they were willing and really on top of raising money. We raised over, $30,000 to $50,000, I believe.
Mutual Aid created an immediate needs Facebook group, which allowed people to share their stories and request immediate help.
I have amassed a wonderful group of friends from around the entire country who are constantly sending me boxes from Amazon that have enabled me to be able to distribute foods, personal care items, all the way down to solar lights and flashlights and a whole multitude of things for the various needs in this community.
While Mutual Aid focuses on immediate needs, another nonprofit in Ithaca, the Women's Opportunity Center, provides more long-term services to women looking for employment and support.
Where a lot of our women come in and they feel like this is their second home or their safe place. We run a series of different trainings. We work on business office administration training, and then we also work on customer service training, along with life coaching skills to boost our self-confidence and empowerment.
Ryan Harriet, the center's executive director, coordinates the day-to-day activities of the center with help of a paid staff and volunteers.
So this is all free to our clientele. They're welcome, to see what fits their desire. We always give them a couple different outfits because, we all like to change our minds.
Absolutely.
So they'll get accessories as well. If you've been out of the workforce for some time, you don't think about how much money you need to spend before. Like, all right, bus pass, if I take the bus, or gas, and then you have to pack your lunch and then water bottles and makeup and clothes.
On March 22nd, the Women's Opportunity Center had to close their doors to the public, but the essential services the center provided didn't stop.
Made sure we were meeting with our clients by phone, and during that time I built a classroom training on Google Classroom. So all of our material went into different sections of our Google Class.
But the hard work paid off. The switch to virtual services allowed the center to connect with their clients on a more personal level.
So actually, they really enjoy the online and the Zoom private coaching sessions. I think we've been able to provide more one-on-one to our clients. We have absolutely had more interest of women who have wanted to come, they weren't able to participate because of transportation, childcare, their hours at work.
Both groups were able to continue spreading their mission, but the money and resources started to dry up. Harriet had to lay off nearly her entire staff at the center when the state funding stopped coming in.
It's not because of anything that was wrongdoing. It was because, from my understanding, the Department of Labor Displaced Homemaker contractors, or all of them, were moved to work on unemployment. And so it really, blagged everything up.
At Mutual Aid, the donations began to fade as the community went back to work, while the pandemic's effects still continued.
I think that donations are becoming harder and harder for people. Again, the unemployment went down.
But despite the challenges, both groups were able to continue serving the community.
Oh, this is like their safe haven, yeah. It's a place that, you walk in the door, you take a deep breath, and I feel like they have decided it's time to complete the goals that they wanted in life. They might not know the right direction they want to go at that moment, but it's a kind of reflect, figure out who you are, and grow and learn from that.
As the winter months loom and the potential for positive cases of the virus to rise, the community may need each other more than ever.
And people are actually putting stuff in their freezer to test the shelf lives and the stabilities of foods, and we're really trying to figure out how we can continue meeting the needs of the people.
Meeting people where they are at is at the core of what Mutual Aid and the Women's Opportunity Center continue to do, day in and day out. And it's changing lives, one person at a time.
I know that Mutual Aid is a very happy part of my life. I think there's so many dynamics happening right now in our society and around us in so many ways, that the connections and experiences through Mutual Aid Tompkins have been an absolute positivity in my life.
That's ICTV Reports this evening. Be sure to tune in on December 3rd for our final episode of the semester. Have a great night.